You're listening to No Plot, Only Lore, a podcast about games and the tables we play them at. Your DMs tonight and every night are Josh and Chris. You can find us on all podcast platforms or check us out at noplotonlylore.com. If you like what you hear today, please rate and review the show and share it with everyone you've ever met.
So total party kill. That's a thing that happened last week.
I don't know why you would do that, but I guess it's the inevitable outcome of their actions.
Yeah, so like the thing that happened was coming off of like killing a player character the session before that for making silly choices. I set everything up so that we had like a bit of a time skip back so that the two player characters who were like rejoining or joining the party had an opportunity to like make it to the party before the combat started. So it was like a 4v3 orc battle. It was like CR 1.5.
Okay.
And each of them decided that they were going to take on their own orc.
That's bad math.
Yeah, so like not the best of strategy in this case. Like there wasn't any focus fire happening, and these guys were running around with like 1d10 great axes.
Yeah, those will wreck a player pretty quick.
Yeah, on a party of like level 1 and 2s.
Yep.
So like 10 hit points, that is enough to down somebody.
Oh yeah.
So the fewer of those you have swinging around at any given time, I think the better off your party is going to be.
Definitely.
But the fact that there were 3 of them going into the second last round and then 2 of them going into the last round where there was just one player character left shooting her bow definitely wasn't looking great.
No.
And then the fact that the player who had the bow didn't use her full movement to try and escape the orcs, so they were able to catch up and deal a bunch of damage, was why she died. And if she hadn't died, then maybe she would have been able to save the rest of the team. But
yeah, if she hadn't lost, she would have won.
Yeah, if she hadn't lost, then the whole party would have won. But instead, we all lost, and that made me real sad.
Do you think this is like an experience problem or just a really atrocious decision-making problem?
I think that my players aren't used to dealing with somebody who is actually willing to kill them.
That's fair.
And like part of the problem rolling into this one was that somebody had made a comment about like, we're probably fucked unless Christopher brought some Deus Ex Machina nonsense to like save us.
Right.
And I had some in my back pocket, right? Like there was absolutely an Ex Machina that I could have deused, and because they called me out on it, I felt like I couldn't.
Yeah, you're like, fine, you don't want a Deus Ex Machina? You're not getting a Deus Ex Machina.
And it wasn't even like a Deus Ex Machina. Like, I have left a bunch of hints that there is somebody who is tracking the player characters since they left town. Right? Like, there's sets of tracks that go off in different directions. There's, like, another spot where somebody made, like, a tiny camp that's nearby where the dingoes happened.
Okay.
Right? Like, there's all sorts of, like, little hints that I left that somebody has been tracking them.
Right.
And my plan was for that character to, like, show up when the shit got really heavy and, like, take out an orc and then, like, even some odds, right?
Right.
But because they were like, yeah, we're fucked unless Christopher pulls a Deus Ex Machina, I was like, cool, well, I guess you're fucked then.
Yep. Oh, well.
Oh, well. But, like, the reason that I'm bringing this up is because, 1, I think it's hilarious that there was a total party kill. And 2, I put an awful lot of work into our wiki.
Right.
Like, it is a relatively well-detailed wiki for a unique-ish setting that I created for this campaign. And has, like, a couple thousand words and, like, lots of images that I stole from Midjourney. And, like, a lot of thought went into, like, crafting that whole thing. And now we're chucking the whole thing out the fucking window.
Yeah. That's... I mean, wikis are so handy, right? That's
They
definitely a great tool for onboarding people, especially to ongoing campaigns that you've created in a world, whatever. But yeah, you've sunk a bunch of time into something that's just going to get flushed right now. Do you think it's salvageable in the future? Like, is this work just gone forever, or are you just going to kind of put a pin in it until you can come back with not idiots?
I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. Like the concept was pretty simple, and there are definitely people who have done it before. It was just like Fantasy Australia.
Right.
Like the way that the party was brought together is you have all been sentenced to transportation for a crime that you may or may not have committed.
Okay.
Right. And so there were these 4 people who were sitting next to each other on the boat where people were like dying in puddles of their own shit. And that creates a bond for some people.
Sure.
And so then they got involved with like some random adventurer nonsense. But there wasn't really a lot of time to develop it because my player characters kept dying.
Well, and that's definitely a big problem for continuity purposes.
A little bit. Although there were so many cool things that we ended up coming up with for it. So like, one of my favorite things is that we separated the idea of half orcs from like pygmy orcs.
Oh, I see.
In this like Fantasy Australia, so it's like you've got your typical half orcs that are like somebody that is a cross between an orc and a human. But then you've also got like the self-propagating race of not quite as big and nasty as other orcs.
Okay.
And so we wanted them to have like a separate culture, and we kind of like built that little bit on the like Ogier from Wheel of Time, like nature focused folk that like lived in these little like oasis places that were like tended by druids and like had this like whole culture going. So like that was a lot of fun coming up with like that stuff. And I could definitely see myself using that entire culture in a different thing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the worst case, what you've done now is just create new ideas that you're going to steal from yourself for the future. And if the wiki is a place to record that, then whatever.
Right. And I mean, that's what I've done with some previous wikis as well. Like, we had a wiki going for the Bones of a Dead God campaign back in the day. I'm not sure if anybody used it except me.
Yeah, I didn't even know that existed. I never even looked at it when we were playing. That was also, I mean, not to date ourselves, but that was like 15 years ago. That was kind of pre-commonplace wiki usage. So,
yeah, and like I'm using the same tool that I was back then. It's a site called Obsidian Portal.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah, and it's dated. Like it's definitely looking older than it was when I first started using it, but still really useful.
Free is free.
Oh no, I paid for it.
Oh God.
Yeah, I paid for the extra, like, cool things that I could do with it.
Mm-hmm. And you've made good use of those cool things?
I have made good use of those cool things.
All right.
The fact that it is all getting flushed
yeah,
feels a bit like a sunk cost fallacy right now, where it's just like, if I just put some more money in, it'll be fine.
Well, no amount of money is going to resurrect that party, that's for sure.
No, it won't. But we're gonna be looking at starting an Eberron thing next. That's more city, less fighting.
Okay.
And do a bit more of the talking espionage stuff. So their interesting decision making will likely not have any consequences at all, I'm sure.
So, is there a reason that you choose to use, like, if you're the person who's primarily interacting with it, is there a reason you choose to use wikis over just a piece of paper, like notebooks for specific campaigns?
I like the organization factor, right? Like, I could use a tool like a screenplay writing tool or something that like divides things into chapters and like has things in like files, or I could just like set up a directory on my desktop. But having the wiki, one, I'm able to present it to my players with 0 difficulty, right? Like I don't have to send them a file, they don't have to open it, they don't have to have the same programs, right? Like it's all just available on the net. And then being able to like organize it into sections and organize it into like various links that have like other link tables on them and stuff. I found that very helpful for my process.
I see.
And just I don't know, it feels good. It feels different, right? Like writing in a word processor or on a piece of paper. It feels a bit more like the classic lonely fun part of D&D. Right?
Sure.
Like,
I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I have a problem with like trusting, I don't know, cloud services and tech in general to be around for as long as I want them to be, which is indefinitely.
Right. Yeah.
like I don't ever want to lose access to my work. And if I have a book with my work in it, then it's on me, right?
You're still just feeling
for better or
burned
worse
from like GeoCities going down. Is that it?
Well, I mean, yeah, frankly, like lots of different repositories of my work and information in the past have just vanished into the ether. And, you know, of course, being like scared of any, you know, like you see these horror stories right now of people losing access to things that they purchased because of rights issues with digital libraries.
Well, like purchased.
That's
a fun word for a lot of the services that we're seeing.
Well, and that's what pisses me off is like no one can take my D&D books away from me because I friggin' own them, right? Like it's there, it's in my basement. You can't come repossess it. So I feel a certain amount of trepidation about trusting digital content. Totally.
Do you have a Beyond account?
And that extends to...
Do you have a D&D Beyond account?
Like a paid one?
Oh, okay.
No. I've never paid for Beyond in my life. And I don't think I ever will. Because that one to me seems one of the more egregious money grabs for what I feel are like base functionality tools to 5th edition that they seem to have like hidden behind a paywall in addition to purchasing the books.
Right.
I was happy to use some of the digital tools that they put out in 4th edition because it felt like they understood the relationship better between the two of us and respected it more. And now they just want to wring every dollar they can out of every possible corner of the market, even to the point of making me pay multiple times for the same thing. So
I do find it really weird that
will.
you don't gain access to like digital copies of your books as soon as you buy like a physical copy.
And that's the biggest thing for me. I think I could really, really get behind D&D Beyond much more fully if my physical book came with access to a digital copy and their character builder tool allowed me to access the things that I had purchased physically in that digital space, right? Like, I get that they put a little freebie version out there that you can try a few things just as a sampler, but that came after 4th edition of here's everything we've made for free in our character builder, right? Like and not just like the books, because I bought the books and I had the books, I still use the character builder, but then it was all the extra little content that they published in Dungeon Magazine or Dragon Magazine or whatever what was going on at the time. This all the little homebrew stuff, all the little cool ideas, and they really opened up like the accessibility to the community. Like, hey, here's a reason to come purchase our digital zine because, you know, look at this cool thing we've been working on, and maybe you want to read more about that and the idea behind this new subclass or whatever. But now they're like, no, you have to trust that we're making good things and give us money every month, otherwise you get nothing, and you're just going to be, you know, paying a grand total of like $100 and something to get your physical copy and your digital copy
Of the same content.
just of the exact same content.
So this might show just how behind the times I am as far as like D&D Beyond or like D&D specific stuff. right? Like I was real heavy into it in like second edition, real heavy into it in third edition, real heavy into it in fourth edition and fifth edition. I just kind of fell off.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're still doing Dungeon or Dragon as publications. Like they were doing them as digital publications for a while. Is that still happening?
I genuinely don't know. I know they were in in fourth, but I could not tell you right now if they do anything online.
Well, then there was a lot of drama around that too, right? When fourth edition was announced, and then they pulled the Dragon license from Paizo.
Yeah, it feels to me like they've gotten protective of the license to the point of like killing it. Like there's the example I'm trying to think of exactly how it works. But basically, like certain things can only exist if you let them breathe, and if you just like take your license and you stick it in an airtight bag to protect it, it'll die.
Not letting their bread rise. Yeah.
Right, and they're not letting the community inhabit the license. They're just like, here, consume content, pay us for more content, and consume that, and don't engage and be creative and spread the passion to your friends, because we are just going to serve it all up for you. You should have no agency within your fandom or whatever.
I wonder how much of that is related to the media push that they've been doing, right? Like they've got the D&D movie that came out, and it was better than it had any right to be. They've got a D&D TV series in the works right now, is my understanding, right? And I wonder how much of that licensing stuff, like how much of the weird legal stuff that's happening is related to like maintaining those IPs for those projects.
Honestly, they've been pushing this since before the movie. I think it's been more and more restrictive ever since they switched to fifth edition.
For sure. And before that too, even, right? Like the fourth edition switch over involved a lot of like weird protectionism that was happening, and like third party projects had to adhere to like their weird moral standards. Like I remember I got in a fight with a pervert who had a D&D blog because I had made the case that in fourth edition D&D, Wizards of the Coast had made it very clear that like sexual content doesn't exist, right? We aren't allowing that.
Right.
That isn't part of our licensing. We're not going to allow like a book of carnal knowledge to get published again.
Right, and frankly, I fully support that for the hobby as a whole. Like, clean up some of the weirdness. People are going to get too weird if you let it in.
I say let your freak flag fly, but like if your whole crew is down with like a weird sexy Dragon Rider campaign, then absolutely do whatever it is that you guys are going to do. But like that needs to be negotiated well.
Yeah, but it doesn't need an official source book.
Well, it wasn't an official source book. It was a third party source book. But like they weren't going to allow those kinds of like licensed materials to continue on. And
well, that's what I'm saying. By allowing them to use the license, that makes it official.
Yeah.
You know,
official-ish. Like
official enough for the casual person to have a more difficult time telling them apart. That's for sure.
For sure. Like I could absolutely see somebody being confused, pulling that book off of the shelves and being like, "Why are they talking about like elven mating rituals?" So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was back in my blogging days, and he seemed to think that I felt that D&D should never have sex in it, and I was like, no, that's not what I said. But yeah. Anyway, wikis.
I mean, it's such a weird like balance to maintain in a group that my default is to say no, D&D should not have any sex in it.
Yeah.
Like, if you have anything more than a fade to black, then you're getting into weirdo territory.
Yeah. There has definitely been some situations, like especially with NPCs for me, where like things have gotten like awkwardly sexy, but it's been on purpose, like on my side. Whereas like I need to put my players and my characters into like a really awkward and weird situation. So here's a demon that is like getting blown while having an audience with you. Right.
I don't know, man. I think it just gets too far into weirdo territory.
I mean, I'm a weirdo, so maybe that accounts for some of it.
Yeah, there. All right. Well, let's
get off of that. But
let's reel this back to the main idea that we were getting at first. So, along this idea of wikis and stuff for your campaign, digital tools in general. There's a lot of, especially in the era of online play with COVID being the deciding factor, and then more people consuming more content online and trying to find ways to hook up with people who don't have access to normal play groups. Plus just a bunch of other innovations over time. There's a lot more digital content in Dungeons & Dragons than there ever has been. And that's not an unreasonable thing to say. It's ballooned in the last few years. I know you and I sort of have differing opinions on what amount of technology should or shouldn't be present in your tabletop role-playing game. But there's a few different tools that we came up with in our brainstorming session here that we can kind of go back and forth about their place on the tabletop.
So let's start with Zoom. Right, because we did touch on COVID just now.
Sure.
Right? Zoom.
Yeah, we touched Zoom, and I think that ties in with virtual tabletops in general.
I don't necessarily think that's true, because there are a lot of groups that they don't use a tabletop at all. Right, you get those theater of the mind kids that they don't use any minis, they don't need a tabletop. And so you can have your entire game session just over Zoom without having to have a virtual tabletop.
I suppose that's true, but there's I'd say those people are in the minority.
Really?
A lot of the online play is facilitated with a combination of some sort of video chat and digital tabletop. But let's start with Zoom in general. Well, Zoom, Discord, any of those online meeting platforms.
Have you ever played in a virtual a meeting room?
I have played with people who had to call in for various reasons. Yeah, but I have not been in a campaign that was primarily online like
when
that.
Everybody's just sitting around a table and Jerry is a laptop.
Yes. Yeah. And it's hey, I'm isolating this week because of COVID or whatever. I mean, you make do. You have one laptop pointed at the table and one at his face and whatever. We made it work. It wasn't terrible. I think the most of the burden was on him to understand what was happening on the tabletop, because we are the group we were in did use miniatures and hex and grids and stuff like that for combat and things like that. But overall, I didn't feel like the role play side of it was particularly impacted. And we had already built a strong enough relationship around the table that it wasn't weird that he wasn't there or that he was calling in. Because we're just, I don't know. And maybe it's sort of the weird neurodivergence of the table anyways, but there's not a lot of eye contact at the best of times at our table, especially in role-playing situations where it just, I aside from interacting with the DM, I don't really want to make eye contact with other players when I'm trying to get into character or something, especially if they're not, because I think that's one of the things about that table in particular is that our level of in-characterness waxes and wanes, often completely independent of each other. So, frankly, having one less person at the table made it a little easier for me to stay in character if need be. But we've never been a super in character all the time group anyways as it is. So that relaxed atmosphere was not really impacted by
I've only ever played that once, and I hated it so goddamn much that I would never do it again.
Really, you would rather cancel a session?
No,
than
I would
have
actually
one person
if
Skype
we're
in?
going to have one person Skype in, I think we should all Skype in. Right,
Oh, I see.
The interactions that I've had role playing in team meetings, Zoom or Teams or whatever, have mostly been all of us are virtual. We don't actually have like people sitting around the table at the same time as we have like virtual players. So like the entire idea of just having like a laptop be frank weirds me out.
Right.
Like I don't really know how to like interact, because I do a lot of eye contact and I do a lot of in character interactions and I do do a lot of like the role playing part of stuff, and so to like have that kind of connection at a table for most of the players, and then one person is just kind of like the odd person out. It feels to me a lot more awkward than just like all of us interacting. Although I do find that dynamic in an all Zoom game is very different from.
Oh, like, definitely, absolutely.
Spotlight time is a lot harder to try and navigate, right? Because like one of the tools that you have as a DM for Spotlight time is who you're paying attention to. It's their turn, right? So like if you turn your entire face and body to look at Sandra, it is Sandra's turn, right? Like that is you indicating that they should be telling you stuff. Right, and losing that body language when you're sitting at a Zoom meeting, because nobody knows which square you're looking at.
Right. Unless you arrange half a dozen iPads around the table and turn to face each one.
Yeah, that is possible. Although, again, like, who's going to be able to tell which iPad is theirs, right? Like,
I suppose, yeah. We don't maintain placement continuity in your table? Oh, that's okay.
I don't give a shit.
And I don't know if this is. I don't think we've like consciously made this decision, but every time we just fall into the same places.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like just because of my experience doing those like 17-person tables where it's just like chaos all the time.
Ew.
But I don't even pay attention to like who you are when you're sitting at the table. I don't give a shit. I just need to get this turn done.
That's fair. Yeah.
So yeah, like I've never cared about like seat continuity. Nobody has their spot at my table. I guess they may have arranged themselves in that way, and I haven't noticed yet.
Well, keep an eye out for next time.
Now I'm just gonna have to try and remember like where people were seating, like where people were sitting.
Yeah, because I mean, in basically every group I've ever been in, people found their spot sitting next to people that they were more comfortable role playing near, or would have like more friendly asides with, and then that's the spot they would sit every time. Even if like the whole group generally got along well, people would just sort of like pair and trio up at the table and then stay in proximity to each other.
I realize that we've talked about like entertainment D&D in like every single episode so far.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like those tables will tend to be more very specific about their seating because of like audio requirements.
Well, and they are. And one thing that I did notice that was interesting is in one of the more recent episodes that I was watching, one of the player characters had died in the previous session. And the lack of that person in that spot was like a tooth missing. Right? Like it just seemed so unnatural to not have somebody sitting in that seat after having like a full table for all of these sessions. That to have somebody like physically not there was very, very strange.
Well, and that I think would even be strange, like just compared to the average, like because obviously they're running things in a different way because of the nature of the show, but like you and I, if someone at our table died, it's not like we're like, okay, well you can't come back anymore. Right? Like we find a way to incorporate them again, and for them to just be like, well, you're gone for the rest of the season. Just like that's so
fucking,
odd.
Like, dark dungeons and be like, your character has died. You must leave the room.
Yeah, it's it just once again highlights how different what they're doing on TV is from like actual dungeons or like actual role playing.
Well, they had a system of like backup characters because like this is apparently going to be a very deadly season.
high casualty.
Based on Game of Thrones, but like
that'll do it.
Right, so it's like got that goofy layer on top of like very serious and like deadly role playing, and so they knew going into this that there were going to be player character deaths, and everybody had to come up with like a secondary character.
So then why wasn't that person playing it?
Because
this
character? Session wasn't one that they could get him into the campaign, right? Like the secondary character that he created was too far away and like separated by events. So like within the next like 2 hour session, they weren't going to be able to get him in there.
Oh, so they didn't just wizard did it him in?
No, because you can't do that for a TV show.
Sure you can. It's Dungeons & Dragons. You can do whatever you want.
Well, yeah, but it's also TV, and you can't. So
whatever.
All right.
Bullshit.
Digital dice.
Virtual tabletops.
Okay, let's talk about virtual tabletops. I hate them.
Oh, yeah, me too. They're awful. They're garbage. It feels unnatural. Nothing looks right. It's just... And, like, I have yet to interact with one that was actually easy to use. Mm-hmm. Like, they're just clunky horse shit every time.
Yeah, done.
Okay, done.
Actually, the closest thing that I've seen to, like, a virtual desk, like a virtual tabletop that could work was Baldur's Gate.
I suppose that works in the sense that, like, every part of it is being handled by the tabletop. But
how do you tell it that you rolled a 13 though, right? Like,
well, exactly. Like, I get that it, it does its thing and you just kind of, you're along for the ride, but it eliminates the dungeon master because it is the dungeon master, right? So, and it's an unforgiving dungeon master.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hesitate to equate that to virtual tabletops at all. It's something based on tabletop role playing, but it is very abstracted.
It's the cleanest version of that I've seen, which I think speaks to one of the fundamental problems with virtual tabletops, is that like if the most intuitive use of the virtual tabletop is to not have players doing the stuff that makes the game, then the problem isn't in the tabletop, right? Like the problem is in the virtual part of that. So I've never seen one that, well, I've seen a lot that I thought were cool, right? Like I wanted to play with some of the virtual tabletops that were like, you put your mini on top of them, right? Like a bunch of the iPad version.
Oh,
they literally never work though.
I wouldn't call that a virtual tabletop though.
And they've never worked, right? And they cost like $7,000.
Oh, they're ridiculous.
Yeah, and they never get like any major support or like a major push or anything. So
yeah, if your group can afford a Microsoft Surface the size of a kitchen table, and then you got one super nerd who wants to sit there and make his second job just fixing the program that he built, then good for you. But if honestly, if you're gonna put any sort of screen into my table, it's just going to be like a projector. Yeah. That's it, right? Like, okay, my map's on there and I can erase things.
Well, and then you get like the weird shadows.
That's
right? And that drives me nuts.
Yeah, it's all just don't do it. Just don't.
All right. What about digital dice? How do you feel about digital dice? Really?
Don't trust them. Straight up. Knowing what I know about random number generators, one, they're not random, and so I just can't trust a system that can be hacked. I mean, best example of this, what industry do you think is most invested in making sure results are truly random? Correct. And every time they've got digital, what do you call them?
RNG algorithms.
One-arm bandits. The slots. The digital slots. There's been multiple cases of as soon as someone can get their hands on one that's been sold or moved off the market, they can crack that algorithm and go into a casino and with a little program on their phone start predicting results and win money. They're not random. I can't abide by non-randomness at the table. And I get that dice aren't perfect because there's errors and flaws.
They're so bad, especially mass-produced dice, right? Like if you buy dice in Winter Cube, right? It doesn't matter what company it is.
Yeah,
they're garbage.
Any dice that is tumble finished like that
and
is just going to be trash.
Finished.
I get that, but
even the high class ones.
I've made the investment in ones that aren't.
Even the high class ones.
What's that?
Even like the Dwarven Forge like metal dice, they're still tumbled.
Right, but you can buy ones that aren't tumbled, and I've made the investment in ones that aren't, and I have invested in more than just a couple sets of them so that I can have them available for players if they want to use them. But even then, I am more comfortable with the human non-randomness than I am with the computer predictability.
These untumbled dice, do they have result weighted fonts? For the engraving on the numbers, are they result weighted? So your 1 is thicker than your 20? Okay, so they're still not random.
No, I know. But they're random enough that I'm okay with it because you can't actually predict
that's how
it.
I feel about the algorithm on random dice. On digital dice. Because for the average person.
But that's the thing. None of the digital dice out there are produced under any auspice of an integrity towards randomness. Some, but I'm saying you could just get a digital app of any sort of dice thing and just go for it, right? It's not the stuff that's going to be produced for a casino. They have to have a certain level of actual randomness by law. And I don't know of any digital dice out there that are adhering to that standard.
There are a couple of dice, and these are only being used in the gambling industry as far as I'm aware. So, this is outside of the realm of role-playing games, but there are physical matched algorithm dice where there is a physical component to the randomness. The ones that I've seen there is a die that is rolled and then a number is recorded, and then that number is used to change the algorithm. And every time that die is rolled, the algorithm changes slightly. Right, based on the result of an actual physical die.
So, do my players have access to those? Because it sounds like
they should
only D6s.
But are your players going to be able to tell the difference between a Google rolling dice for them or rolling dice themselves?
I'll know. That's the problem. I'll know. I don't care what they know.
Google has predestined.
I'll know they
are going to pass this check.
Yeah. So there's a second part to my dislike of digital dice, and that actually ties into a lot of the other tools as well. But I feel like there is a level of ownership and buy-in to the game itself when you have to invest in and maintain physical media in order to be involved. You are not going to get people who have their favorite lucky algorithm they choose every time they need to make a really important attack.
Let's not say that, because I know that there's going to be a couple of developers that are just I have my favorite algorithm. You shut up.
I speak in absolute generalities because that's the easiest way to communicate. But there's not a chance that you're going to have the same level of buy-in to something that someone can't hold. Tactile feedback is real and important, and it's so important that the auto industry is changing to accommodate the complaints of consumers who are tired of like touchpads and screens in their cars. They're like, I want my buttons back. Thank you very fucking much. And so having a physical thing that you manipulate and can, there's obviously the aesthetic side of dice, finding a color, pattern, design, whatever that really speaks to you and maybe better connects you with the character.
You're talking to a guy who buys dice by the pound, man.
Oh, ew. I did that once out of pure necessity, but I'm the kind of person who occasionally buys dice for specific characters. Like when I was playing that monk, I found a set of dice with little panda toys inside of them. And I was like, well, it's close enough to a Kung Fu Panda. Those are his dice now.
Monk dice.
Yeah, R.I.P. Monk dice. But no, I've got my general purpose dice, but every once in a while, if there's like a longer campaign and a character that I'm really enjoying, like I'll find his or her set of dice and match up a color theme to a warlock or an occlusion inside of it to something in the character.
It's funny because
and that just helps further the bond between me and the character I've created and help me get into that role-playing headspace.
My dice, again, I typically like buy them by the pound, right? Like I don't usually buy like individual sets. I'm not like a forever DM. I definitely do sit on the other side of the screen occasionally, but most of the time I am DMing. And so like I just need a stack of fucking dice all the time. Actually, it's kind of funny. My last session, my players kept complaining that they were getting shitty rolls, so they wanted different dice, and I gave a guy 2 different dice, and they both were exactly like aesthetically similar to the die that he was having trouble with, and he was just like, no, they've got to look different.
Yeah, because those obviously that set and the run of that color was flawed. Someone at the factory screwed up. So
the set that they were cursing was a little too close to that one. So
well, I mean, even my big pile of DM dice, I years ago bought 5 sets of the same dice with one has like white lettering, one has black lettering. There's 2 sets each of those, and then one blue set. But like they're all the same like runic fonts and whatever. But I wanted to maintain some sort of, I don't know, theme to what I was using them for.
Like,
and I think that extends to a lot of other tools. It's like digital versions just don't have that. Humans want to connect to things in all sorts of weird ways, like even non-living things, and I don't think digital tools will ever have that level of buy-in for someone.
I can see that point, but like I'm still not going to stop somebody from using them.
No, and I'm not saying you should stop them. I'm just saying at my table, I will encourage the use of actual physical media for almost every
And like I've definitely used digital dice
possible
rollers at like behind my DM screen. Like that has been a thing.
Yeah.
Especially on days where like I forgot my dice. I don't have them. I'll just use my phone. Right.
How do
I forget my dice?
Listen, I'm the kind of person who has like my D&D bag like prepped and ready to go.
Yeah, mine is currently sitting.
I don't forget those things
at the place where we play, so I don't have to worry about it for like this crew. But on any game where I'm traveling, there is a solid 40% chance that I am going to forget some integral piece of my kit.
Yeah, no, my kit goes with me wherever I go. I would never leave it somewhere else.
Yeah, but like if I've taken,
no matter how much I trusted that place.
If I've like shuffled things around, I've like moved a bunch of dice out so that I can fit something else in. I've got a couple splat books that I need to move around, and then I just leave my dice on my bed. Right.
Ugh.
Happens all the time. ADHD is a bitch.
That is an excuse, Christopher.
I
suffer as well, and
if I'm not.
That is why I created tools and routines to make sure that those kinds of things
my
are
dice
not
are currently sitting where we play. That is the tool that I've come up with. I just don't move them. They're fine. But like,
okay, so speaking of, you mentioned digital dice and other things, but phones and tablets replacing books.
not just books. Like, one of the things that I have found really useful in this campaign, because like I don't have a great amount of rules knowledge for 5e. A lot of what I'm taking is like cribbed from 3.5 and 4 and like the early organized play stuff that they were doing for 5. So like my rules mastery for this game is still pretty light. And being able to just ask Google what a rule is a fucking lifesaver. Right, like if I'm in the middle of a thing and I have forgotten how much damage an unarmed strike does if you're not a monk, I can just ask Google.
D4.
It's 1. It does 1 plus strength modifier.
An unarmed strength?
No,
I thought it was
only for a
D4.
monk. Yes.
Whatever.
And that's the thing that we had to look up is like I thought it was a D4 as well, and so I asked Google, what is the unarmed strike for a non-monk, and Google told me. Right, and that.
But yeah, like that seems fundamentally different than like making broad use of them to replace.
Oh no, I also use it to replace my source books. Like the number one app on my phone on any given time is going to be either Kindle or Google Books. And I have all of the D&D books on like my phone ready to go. I've got and then I'm also reading novels on them all the time. Right? So like I have access to all of the rules on my phone as well as like a rule checker phone. And like I love having physical books because I like to flip through them.
Yeah, that's super important. I mean, I was just dealing with this. I'm starting a new group next week. I'm going to be DMing for a group of interested senior citizens who have no exposure to any fantasy whatsoever, but trying to get across basic concepts. I'm working with a gentleman who is very heavy on the tech side of D&D, and to this initial meeting with these seniors, he brought a laptop, and I brought my physical books. And guess which person was actually able to communicate with the people?
For sure.
Yeah, turns out being able to pass around a book and show here's a picture of a barbarian rather than trying to
and like what
describe
makes a barbarian different from a fighter, right?
Is a lot easier.
Thematically, what makes a barbarian different from a fighter.
Yeah. And yeah, you got to go a lot deeper than angry man with sword, especially when it comes to people who just don't know what, like, the things that we take as like for granted as archetypes and tropes. They don't have that base knowledge of these things. I likened it to teaching D&D to children who just don't have frame of reference for anything at all in life, let alone
speaking of that,
role-playing games.
I definitely want you to continue the story.
This is certainly going to be
like your point, but did I tell you that my son is running a D&D session at his school? Yeah, he started like a D&D club.
Oh, good for
at
him.
His school that runs every Wednesday. Right?
Great. And honestly, kids these days probably have a lot more exposure to the tropes that we come to rely on than that generation does, because pop culture is just all culture now. So, I mean, it's certainly going to be an interesting learning experience. I have resigned myself to the fact that we are not going to be playing what you or I would consider Dungeons and or Dragons for a while, because never mind time constraints and familiarity constraints, I'm going to have to simplify the role-playing game experience to the point where it'll be fundamentally unrecognizable for quite a while until I can see if there is a level of buy-in from these people that will allow them to educate themselves and come to the table with a little bit more than just, free time and an openness to new experiences. I don't have confidence that will ever happen, frankly, because it seems like and I understood this going in, but it seems like they're just looking for something to fill the time. And they want that brought to them.
No, and that's
they
fair.
don't want to go seek it out.
Yeah, I get that.
If that makes sense.
I don't.
But we'll see. I mean, these are people with nothing but free time, and if something grabs their imagination like it hasn't done in 50 years, I could come back to a table in a month and have a bunch of people champing at the bit with weirdo character ideas that make me blush. So
dungeon master by some enterprising 70-year-old.
And ultimately, I would love if that happened. I mean, the plan is not for me to just run one table forever, although it probably will happen for quite a while like that. But the vision was get a group going and then give that group the tools and the equipment and the know-how to sustain themselves and perpetuate the group on their own and grow a community at their lodge or whatever it is, and bring that to multiple
I think that's
centers throughout town.
Like, everything about that idea makes me happy, right? Because, like, older generations don't always get the amount of attention that they need. They certainly need for entertainment that is more stimulating than you're going to get from, like, watching another 12 hours of soap operas. But, like, the idea of getting a bunch of, like, old people role-playing, I love it. I love when this hobby is spread to people who have never had, like, touchstones with it. So.
Well, my hope is that, to use a poor analogy, that they start writing their own soap operas, that they turn from just consuming content to creating it and re-stimulate their brains that have been sort of under-stimulated for years now from, like you said, like societal neglect.
I don't want to get like too far off table with that, but like the
so I guess we'll see what happens. Yeah,
I don't know if D&D is necessarily the game.
But to my point on that, like, it may not be. This was not initially my idea. I've just been brought on with it, so we're going to see what happens. And that's where I'm going to be taking on a lot of the load in this group, is just the rules knowledge, and we'll see what happens. I had wanted to do something similar to this, but focusing on card and board games. You'll see plenty of seniors groups that enjoy their canasta and their bridge and whatever, and there's a wide world of card games out there that I think could very easily translate.
They do not need that stress in their life. They don't need to hate each other.
No, what I want to do is introduce them to Catan so that we can hopefully, through the results of, we'll call them heightened emotions, just sort of shrink that big gray wave that's going to hit us in a few years.
All right. I see those machinations.
Yeah. No, games like The Crew, that is a trick-taking game. They're used to playing stuff like that, and it's a cooperative trick-taking game. So, but the ultimate idea is working on facilitating more relationships within the communities, because that's been shown to prolong life and keep off a certain amount of mental decline. And then just try to grow positive interactions with two, I would say, marginalized communities.
That's so great. Like, I want to be a sarcastic asshole because it's funny, but I just fucking love that. I do.
Well, we'll see what happens, because I might come back next week and be like, screw these difficult, troublesome, just cantankerous old, who knows? We'll see what happens.
On her first week.
Yeah, just out of spite. Okay, so we're running out of time, but I want to touch on this idea of AI being used for content purposes.
So this is a thing I have done. This is a thing that was involved in my most recent campaign. I used two tools pretty extensively, and had kind of varying degrees of success with them. So the first one that I used was ChatGPT 3. And the thing that I used that for primarily was just stat blocks.
Okay.
So,
Do you think that ChatGPT understands the balance of mobs in 5th edition well enough to generate fair stat blocks?
early mobs, yes. I have a feeling that they're going to have a lot more trouble understanding balance of action economy moving into higher levels.
Okay.
But for like I was playing with first and second level characters. I was dealing with like 1/4 to half CR creatures for the most part.
Okay.
And then I checked the math, right? Like when they spit out a stat block, I went back to my monster manual to compare to other creatures of a similar CR, and what I was getting was very close.
Okay.
The only real difference that I saw was those great axes. I do feel like a 1d10 plus 3 great axe is probably a bit much for a 1/2 CR encounter. But again, if they had focused fire and gotten rid of 2 of them early on, then it wouldn't have been as big a deal.
Yeah.
So like 1d10 plus 3 is a lot, and like probably a little heavily balanced, but not so challenging that I would consider that outside of the 1/2 CR.
Yeah, I think most of the problem with those creatures was the party's lack of focus. So first of all, I'll say right now, I don't create creatures.
Okay.
I just don't. I also don't really create my own worlds, if that makes sense. Like, the Forgotten Realms exist, Eberron exists, Darksun exists. Someone's doing more work than I am. I will just make stories in that setting. I know. And to that end, they're also making creatures that exist in those worlds. And so I don't feel comfortable inserting creatures into those worlds.
Don't feel comfortable, or you are concerned that the creatures that you put into those worlds will be lacking or too powerful in certain ways? Like, what is keeping you from creating your own creatures?
I don't trust my own creativity to make an interesting creature.
I don't know if you've ever seen a flail snail, but like, you do not have to worry about coming up with some lame creatures, dude. They covered.
But that's just it. Like, and frankly, I feel like there's enough out there that I can just look for cool underused things that already have stat blocks that exist, and use what's been the rules as written, as it were, because there's plenty of especially I feel like this game has I don't want to say a bias, but like a weight towards
I think that's
early levels.
a fair criticism for 5.
And yeah, and so getting the opportunity to get to some of the higher challenge ratings and see some of the truly weird stuff that's out there is rare. And I feel like, weirdly, I sort of owe it to the creators of those creatures to get them to the table so that people can see their weird little creations.
Weird sense of obligation. I'll roll with it.
And learn to respect an Onkeg for what it is.
Yeah, I guess. For me, there has always been a matter of like matching flavor, right? So like whatever it is that I'm doing, whatever like weird ass campaign I'm throwing at my players, I always feel the need to tweak it and make it a little more unique and like specialized for the thing that we're doing. even if I am using like
Okay.
a pretty standard character, like I used orcs and drow in this one, and like the
Right.
things that made them different were mostly cultural, right? It wasn't like I wasn't doing anything like crazy with their stats or abilities or anything. It was mostly just like the way that they were presented. But I still had to do like
Right.
little tweaks here and there to kind of make that come through. And so
Yeah.
having ChatGPT just spit out a stat block that I could then tweak was really helpful. It meant that I had to copy out like significantly less stuff.
Sure.
Most of the math was already taken care of for me, right? Like I had to do like a little bit of adjusting on like AC occasionally, and it was almost always like adjusting down for my players, and it didn't help. But yeah, like the stat block that it spit out for me was exactly what I wanted, and even if I was just using like standard character blocks, the orc that it gave me, like the one half CR orc that it gave me, was word for word the one from the monster manual. Right, and I just now had
Yeah.
that, and I could tweak it if I needed to.
I suppose. I don't know. Maybe it's just my like weird high level of distrust for
Well, and again, like it
this
would be
kind of
interesting to
stuff.
see how that's going to interact with higher levels, because like a lot of the balancing
Yeah.
issues that we're seeing in 5e are based on that action economy, and like people who are
Yeah.
much smarter than me have broken that down in much more interesting ways than I ever could. But I wonder how much attention ChatGPT would be able to pay to something like action economy when spitting out a standardized stat block.
Yeah, like unless there's someone specifically like feeding a bunch of information into it just so that it understands how the game works and how the balance is
Well, I
intended to
mean, it can
be.
read the whole
I
SRD.
I don't
Like,
know.
it has everything that it needs to be able to do D&D.
But
Well,
yeah,
no,
but does it
of course it doesn't.
understand it?
It's not cognizant. It isn't capable of making like unique or creative thought and like grokking.
No, I'm saying like it's got the SRD, but like, shut up.
Yeah.
I understand it is not a person. Like just because it has the raw words of it doesn't mean that like it's able to contextualize what that
It has
information
been
means.
surprisingly good at that.
Yeah.
The places where it failed for me were in scenario creation. So like just getting stats
Okay.
was super easy. Came in really like clean. It was easy to like mess around with. I asked it to give me like a skill challenge, basically like a group challenge to escape a slave ship, essentially. And what it gave me was one, some of the most
Yeah.
generic bullshit that I have ever seen. Right, like the thing that they had given me might as well have come out of one of the like early organized play manuals for like, here is how to escape
Right.
from a ship, and then like gave me like a couple of super generic dudes that they could end up fighting, and then like the roles that they gave me
Yeah.
were incredibly uninspired. Like a DC 15 pick locks check to see if you can break your manacles or whatever, and it was just like the scenario was so bread and butter that I would have felt bad running it.
Yep. Yeah, because it's
Oh yeah, for sure.
incapable
And I
of
wasn't expecting
creative
it
thought.
to like be great at that, but I was hoping for like,
Yeah.
yeah, because like I wasn't going to
Slightly
steal
better
the
than
entire
what it was.
scenario from ChatGPT, right? Like I was looking to it for inspiration for other stuff, which I think is probably the best use for that technology. Is to just like take whatever you need from it and then do your own thing with it. But yeah, it was utterly uninspiring to the point that I ended up just not using a skill challenge for that at all. Yeah,
So I have a bad idea, but maybe we should just try to run a campaign using nothing but
I'm
ChatGPT
pretty sure
content.
somebody has tried it. Oh yeah. Oh, like you and
I
I
don't care
should
what they
play
did. I think we should try to
D&D
do
with
it.
ChatGPT. Okay.
Yeah. Just to see if we can run through like a, I don't know, 4-session
You know, it'd be
campaign
fun.
or
I think we
something.
might need to
Just to
like,
see what happens.
do that with hot mics. Like just spend an hour
Oh,
playing
yeah,
D&D
absolutely.
according to ChatGPT. Yeah. All right. That's a thing we can
Yeah.
do. The other one that
Sounds
I was
horrific.
using, and I know
I'm so
we're
down.
over time now, but like the other one that I was using was
Okay.
Midjourney that I was using pretty.
Ah, you're a garbage person.
Yeah, just the worst.
I said you're a garbage person.
I am a criminal against art, and I should feel bad. And I do. But yeah.
Art
No, and,
jail
like,
for
I'm-
1,000 years.
I legitimately have very strong concerns about image generating AI. That likely
Right.
stem from my time in art school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know a lot of people who make money making images, and the fact that like a program can make a almost professional looking image in a minute and a half compared to the 6 hours that it would take my friend to do the same is deeply concerning.
Yeah.
And
Very.
so it's not something that I would ever use in a professional context. Right? Like it's not a tool that I would want to use even for like inspiration for other stuff, because it is literally
Okay.
like using it feels like theft. Right? Like I'm just stealing from the artists who
Yeah.
have already made these things. But I have been using it for visual aids at the table. Right? And it's only personal use.
Okay.
It isn't something that is going to get like distributed around.
I guess if you're making your own creatures and you need something to represent a thing that doesn't exist, there are worse options. But I still don't like it. So
It feels gross to use it, and yet I keep doing it. I have no morals, and I should feel bad.
well, as long as we're on the same page. I did kind of want to talk about character builders.
Oh yeah. We're at like an hour 6. I don't know if you want to like.
I think we can get it
Alright,
done
cool.
in 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's talk about some character builders.
Yeah. Okay, so
Character
builders. Some people call them a crutch. These days, I would call them a borderline necessity. Definitely an accessibility tool. They really showed up in 4th edition and were super helpful in just giving you access to every possible option just to streamline the process. I truly believe that you can have a world where the character builder is free, but the access to the content is locked behind purchasing physical copies of the book. Or if you really want to, just a digital copy. That's fine. As long as you purchase some copy of the book, they can add in the stuff that you purchased to the character builder. I know for a fact that's not a programming impossibility.
That's absolutely a thing.
But what they have done now is basically force anyone who needs that extra accessibility help to pay them twice, just out of spite, I guess, or out of some sort of like hatred for the fan
You only
base.
have to pay
But
them once if you don't want physical
D&D
books.
Beyond,
You only have to pay them once
What's
if
that?
you don't want physical books.
I guess, but again, are you sure you're going to have that digital copy forever? You know, I mean, I guess if they send you but they don't send you a PDF, do they? Because that'd be too easy to. Yeah, exactly. So you just got to trust that they're never going to take all of that content away from you when they launch one D&D. Haha. You definitely own this for the next 15 minutes at most.
4th edition books are absolutely accessible from D&D right now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, I especially like, you know, like we talked about this new group I'm going to be working with. I think they would super benefit from digital character builders, but telling them to purchase a digital book is not going to happen, right? They absolutely. I can help guide them through the tool. And I can help them guide them through the character creation process, but they're going to want to buy a physical book every single time.
I do a bit question the idea that like they're a borderline necessity for D&D 5. Like for D&D 4, I am with you 100%. D&D 4 had a lot of moving pieces, and like keeping all of them straight, especially with like the number of abilities and powers you had.
So, I here's the thing. I actually found the opposite to be more true, simply because of the superior organization within 4th edition books. When you were talking about new options for, well, we're going to use 4th edition terminology, but let's say I'm wanting to play a martial class. So I have my player's handbook, and then they put out a martial power book, which has more options for my martial classes, and then martial power 2, which has even more options. But it's all organized within 1 or 2 very clearly labeled books with a very clear theme. If I want to get all the options for playing in my 5th edition game, my warlock or my whatever, it's spread across 4 or 5 different random books that don't necessarily even like suggest that they would have additional content. Like you can't call a book a guide to everything and then only have one additional character option and then say, oh, you got to go buy the other book that has this other stuff, and you're like, well, but you said everything.
It's kind of funny.
It's not everything.
The Eberron
like,
source book for 5th edition, because like I have a lot of the like 3.5 books for it already. But yeah, I was looking at the 5th edition today, and like was surprised at how much of that book was about one city. Right, like it was really strange to me how much of the like book that was introducing the setting was adventure content. Not like adventure option content, but adventure content. That seemed like a very strange choice to me.
And maybe that's just like something that we need to investigate across this edition of D&D as a whole, but it feels like the formatting and the organization of content in this edition is the worst it's ever been.
It's definitely not the worst it's ever been.
Well, I'm saying it feels
I'm sure
like
it feels like between 4th edition and 5th edition, for sure, 5th edition is a step down, but good gods, trying to find anything in 2nd edition was a nightmare.
I don't think anything published pre-3 counts as like...
It isn't even D&D.
It's just not like... It's not like modern standards for anything. It was the Wild West back then. But like if you look at 3.5 and 4, they're very methodical and organized and systematic about what content they put where and how they put it out. I wouldn't
necessarily say that for 3.5 though. Like for 3.5.
A lot better than 5th, that's for sure.
It was definitely better than 5th, but like one of the problems that we ran into with 3 and 3.5 was just the broad number of source books. Right, like they were putting out source books all the time, and then the third-party source books that came out too. If you were allowing third-party content in your game, trying to find anything was a nightmare.
Right, but were those source books just like general world source books, or they were like specifically like character options and
right, like
okay.
A lot of the world books that they put out included character options. So like in Eberron, you had your Warforged and your Artificer class and like changelings and all that.
Yeah.
And then you would have like a book that was nothing but feats, right? Or a book that was nothing but new magic items. Or a book that was nothing but character options for like just magical characters. So like there was some of that, but there was also like, here's a book that is about like one province in the Forgotten Realms, and it's also the thing that has the most powerful warlock ability that we've seen. And so if you can find that, you're going to have to buy this weird-ass splat book for a game you don't even play, right? So
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, 5th edition definitely has that problem, and I think in a very unique way.
Sure.
But like, as far as like base character creation, like the core 3 books, I don't think that a character builder is necessary. It's nice to have.
No, if you're just playing like vanilla ass D&D, sure. But that is the most boring version of D&D, but it's definitely functional. which is fine. Like I that's what I'm going to be doing with this group is nothing more than just base
functionality. I just take those 3 books and then I make up my own shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like the character creators have improved so much. Right, like I'm still remembering 3.5 character creators that were abysmal to use, and like in order to increase your stats, you couldn't like click into the stat to type a number. You had to like individually click an arrow until it was the stat you needed it to be. Right, like some real old, like written in old ass versions of Java, you had to download the character creator onto your computer to be able to use it nonsense.
I love it. I really hate things that like require an online connection. So
would rather use some like jank ass character creation than ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly. If I have to run my house off a generator because the grid went down, at least I can use my character builder.